Okay, let me ask you something. Have you planned out your life or you planned out your year and you say, okay, this is it. This is exactly how it's going to be. Only to realize that you kind of have to chuck it out of the window because the plan that's actually going to happen is not really the plan you decided to have. I know I went through that because if you hadn't noticed, 2 weeks late into posting a podcast episode because I had thought about my plan a couple of months ago, only to have February spin it completely on its head. Now, why am I sharing this with you? It's because I want to introduce to you this week's guest, Leah. And for me, I enjoy talking to her and learning from her about her version of entrepreneurship. She has inspired me to think literally out of the plan. When things go different, what do you do then? And in so many ways, her lessons and her journey along the way, she's really got it nailed down that entrepreneurship is not just about having your own business. Maybe it's something to apply for life. I look forward to sharing this week's episode with you. As always, if you haven't yet, do subscribe to the channel. And if you find it useful, please share it out because the more we share it, you never know who you're going to inspire along the way. Enjoy. What does well-being mean for you in this day and age?
It's a really interesting one because I think it's very individual. And I think well-being for me personally today means something very different than it meant perhaps half a year ago. But I'll begin by answering what it means to me today. And for me, well-being means flexibility of choices. And this is as it relates to my own free time, how I use it, but it also within work, within the balance between what I call my job and my family. So I think, if I was to summarize it, well-being is about choice and about balance. So to give you a concrete example of how my ideal day where my well-being is prioritized, it's a day where I get to spend a morning with my kids, which is not hurried. This is difficult to do, but it does happen sometimes when we're not rushing out the door and, gobbling down breakfast, but one where we can actually connect and cuddle and, get ready for the day in a positive way, where I can take them to school myself. I don't have to bring them to breakfast club or have a nanny bring them, where I can take them. Then where I get to work as well. It's a very big part of who I am and how I feel sort of well actually is having great bits of work as well, stimulating my brain. And then finishing off the day with picking up my kids as well, not a nanny picking them up or not somebody else, me actually going to pick them up, perhaps impromptu play date at the park. The rest of my day would be, I've done my work, I've been really productive, I feel like I've accomplished stuff in that regard, and then I can actually fully put it aside, go pick up my kids, perhaps have an impromptu play date with some of their friends at the park, whatever it is. And then again, have a nice dinner, unhurried, bedtime. And then I will read a book, watch a show, do my hair, something like that. So that would be like my ideal well-being day. So for me, well-being is not synonymous to going to get a massage or...
I was just going to say.
No, that's not and I appreciate for some people it is. For me, it's really that balance of my family, of my work, of my choice of how my day is going to go. That is well-being to me.
I love the fact that you did not mention what everybody ordinarily speaks about self-care. What I find striking, and the audience doesn't notice, is that looks like the ideal day, but you are a powerhouse of a woman who does a lot of things around the family. So I would love if you shared a bit of that.
I suppose my work is very multifaceted. So I'm the founder of an EdTech startup. It's called Cocorio. The name derives from my co-founder's name, Karina, for Coco, and my firstborn, Rio. put that together. So there's always an element of family in everything that I do, as you rightly pointed out.
Yeah.
So that is my business, which we've scaled from nothing to being a really successful business. What we do is we match families with creative professionals like musicians, dancers, actors, as inspiring nannies and mentors for children.
Mm-hmm.
And the whole idea is that they're not just ensuring the kids don't burn down the house, they're actually engaging them in creative activities that are actually proven to support their development, their emotional well-being, and essentially, be sort of something that supports them alongside family life, alongside school, that kind of missing piece. So that's my business. I'm sure we'll get onto more of that.
We will, definitely. Yeah.
But at the moment, my involvement in this is at board level. I work on all the strategic side of the business and where we're heading towards. So that's one aspect of my job. Another aspect of my job is that I work with multiple universities, but in particular Greenwich University, where I support students in building businesses of their own, and also just building entrepreneurial skills as a whole. So I do this through one-on-one advisory, and also putting on events, competitions, bringing in speakers, running boot camps, all sorts of things to kind of equip them with the skills to go out there and build their own businesses. And then I suppose the last sort of missing piece in kind of my work is the mentorship side. I do a lot of mentoring for female founders and students as well. Again, around business building, around entrepreneurial skills. So it's all kind of the same sort of themes, but the work that I do there is in collaboration with Santander, the bank, and various universities. At the moment, Westminster University a lot. I used to work with King's College London as well, and I do some of this at Greenwich as well. So that's kind of my job in a nutshell. I can't answer it in one word. I'm not a doctor or this. I suppose the best summary is an entrepreneur that also supports other people to become entrepreneurs. But yeah, that is me.
I really like that, because I think this is something that's very underestimated, is that women entrepreneurs are not like, they've often been not really spoken about, to be honest. And there's a lot going on behind the scene when you're a woman entrepreneur. And I hear you when you say, I can't just say I'm one thing, I'm many things. But what fascinates me is that your biggest value sounds like your family. Your family is like top priority. And then there's all these amazing projects you do around you. So how do you, and you've said my ideal day is this. How do you balance it all then on a not so ideal day?
Yeah, I think, I can't go out and say that I've got it all figured out. I really don't. But I think I'm definitely heading in the right direction. I think for a long time, balance was a very, very difficult thing for me because, as you mentioned, family has always been first. But the demands of running a scaling business are huge, and there's a lot of sacrifices that come with that. And I wasn't spared. So for a long time, I really did struggle to feel like I was enough of the mother I wanted to be, but also enough of the business owner that I wanted to be. And never mind all these other things that I wanted to do, which I just didn't quite get the chance to do. So one of the main things that I had to do to get to a point where I feel like I do have more of the balance that I need to thrive in all different aspects of life was really analyzing my current situation and being like, am I using my skills in the best way possible right now? And is there a way I can sort of shift that? And what I found was being a founder and being involved and, wearing all the hats in the business and basically being in the business 24/7. There's no such thing as a 9 to 5. And when you're scaling a startup, I realized that for me, this was not something that I could sustain in the long term. And so I had to really figure out, how can I shift this for it to work with my day to day. And that was very difficult, because for anybody who's run a business before, you'll know just how intertwined you are with it, how big of an identity you have over this sort of thing that you're building. And so for me, it was I never ever sort of let myself believe, oh, I should just step away and start something new. I never let myself think that. But I knew I needed a big change. And luckily, I've got an incredible co-founder. And so together we figured out the best way forward. And where we found that a lot of my skills lie are sort of strategically, firstly, and also seeing the bigger picture, empathizing with all sides. That's something that I'm very good at. And naturally, we kind of came to that conclusion that actually me chairing the board and me seeing the business from almost like from above, as opposed to
a bird's eye view.
Yeah, as opposed to seeing all the detail, would actually benefit the business greatly. On the other hand, my co-founder is incredible, I mean, at everything she does, but operationally, she's a genius, an absolute genius. And so it made so much sense for her to lead sort of the day-to-day. And by the way, I have to say that this was not a decision that was done over a coffee.
I was going to ask you.
This was months and years in the making, right? So from the moment I decided I needed a shift, it was a whole sort of year until we came to this point of realizing, okay, this is how it's going to work. So it was a very long kind of process for all sides to figure out what would be best on an individual level, on a business level, and to kind of make it work.
Leah, you know, when we're talking about the well-being, right, in the entrepreneurial space, you had me thinking, okay, you said it takes about it's not just a coffee.
No.
Okay. What was the stopper? Because sometimes, the reason I'm asking this is sometimes we think, oh, we have to keep doing, we have to push.
Yeah.
What made you stop? And then what did you need to ask yourself? Because maybe somebody out there doesn't realize that they are on that way and they had to stop. What would that be?
That's actually like an amazing question. And it goes right back to what you identified initially, the family umbrella in my life. And there was a moment. I woke up on the 5th of October, 2023. Mm-hmm. My second born's first birthday. And I realized I've been fooling myself, because I was glorifying the fact that he was with me every step of that first year, because I carried him in the pouch. He was at every meeting with me. He was always with me. And I was like, I'm spending so much time with my child. And on his first birthday, I woke up and I felt I don't know this child.
Really?
Because he was on me, but I was doing something else. And I felt like I hadn't prioritized moments with him. And that was where I realized, okay, there needs to be a change, because I need to feel like, I've kind of like sort of thought the fact that he's on me is a substitute for spending time with him. I wasn't spending time with him. He was present, but I was doing other things. And that wasn't balance, right? And it's not to say that I shouldn't be doing other things, that I should always be gazing into his eyes and whatever. However, there was an imbalance there. And so that was the real moment for me where there needs to be a shift. Mm-hmm. And that is the day I allowed myself to actually think, the shift can be more than, just deciding, oh, I'm going to actually switch off at 6 p.m. or no, it needs to be a drastic shift. And it was on that day. So it was a very significant moment and a very hard one, because I allowed myself to think a little bit further. To that date before then, it was all like, okay, I need to find a way to sort of switch off more, to create more boundaries. And there's nothing wrong with those things. But in the situation that I was in, there needed to be something a little bit bigger. And
define what bigger was for you. I like this approach, because for me, you've picked on something very, very profound. My family always said you can't be married and have children and have a career. That was my age group. So there's always that, can women have it all?
Yeah.
And you are doing so much of it. and you're taking the uncommon path. You're not doing the yoga, the meditations, and all that stuff. You're taking your path. So how do you define that? Moving, you said it's bigger. What does that look like?
So for me, it was the fact that, just to draw back on what you said, women can have it all. And it was very much in that moment of thinking, yes, I can have it all, but perhaps not at the same time. That was that's how I kind of approached it. So, I've built this successful business with a wonderful team, with a wonderful partner. And I've got these wonderful children and all of that. This is great. But actually to feel fulfilled in both and to be able to excel at both, I needed different roles. And obviously I can't step down from mother. That doesn't work. I can step down from the person who's on everything, every day, on every detail, because there's other bright people, there's other people who can do an amazing job. And so it was obvious where the shift needed to be. And so now, just to contrast from spending, 70, 80-hour weeks working on the business, it's shifted to me seeing all of the, I suppose, strategic problems or wins as well, and sort of finding solutions for those. And it means that I don't have to be thinking about it every waking minute of every day. And that was important for me. And I was in the lucky position that my co-founder actually wanted to keep doing that and wanted to be on, and also has the skills to keep pushing this business on sort of a day-to-day level. So that was the shift for me. It was, I didn't want to completely disconnect from the business, because the business is like, I'm so passionate about what we do, our mission, and I want to be part of the journey, but my involvement in it reached a point where I wasn't able to balance it with the other aspects of my life. And so we had to make that change. And, it was difficult to make, but actually now looking back, so now it's been just over a year since we've kind of implemented things. It's not quite implemented, but anyway, it's been such a positive change for everybody involved. The business is thriving. My co-founder is thriving. I am thriving, and we're able to be our best selves for where the other is needed. So, I suppose I don't even know if I'm answering your question. I hope I am.
You are answering my question. It's nice because, like I said, it goes back to, can you change the way you do things? And you're saying you can choose it on your own. You can choose your own way.
That's a big thing. Yeah, sorry to interrupt you. I think just the choice, it's back to choice. A lot of the time we feel like we don't have choice, like there's something we need to do because of this. And while it can feel like that, and often there's a reason as to why it feels like that, at the end of the day, you actually can make a choice. As long as you take into consideration everyone it involves and, have those discussions, figure out how to make that choice in a way that it doesn't negatively impact everybody, you can make a choice. And when we have that power, and I think, if there's one thing I can say based on just this part of the conversation, is every individual has the power to make a choice for themselves. And we really have to remember that. And sometimes it's hard, but you can, you are the designer of your life.
We like to, you're saying, okay, designer of your life. The question that I had in my head was, yes, we have choice.
Yeah.
But what if you cannot get what you want? Aren't there moments like that where those conversations you had where you could not get actually what you wanted? Or was there somewhere you're also sitting back and have to reflect or compromise or adjust? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think it's all about compromising. In an ideal world, I would, probably still be in the day-to-day of the business, but I don't know, only work half days or something.
Yeah.
But that was just not conducive to what was needed in that moment. So there is compromise involved. And that's not to say that I can't go back one day if that's what I feel would be best for myself and the business, right? So there is compromise. I think it's important to understand that being clear on what you want is important. Having your ideal scenario is important, but also having, meeting people where they're at. I think that's also very important, because it's not just about you, and how other people react, how your decision impacts others will also impact you as a result, if that makes sense. So yeah, I think it is all about compromise, and having open discussions, being very transparent, and not letting things fester. Just said and done.
But what I find so interesting is that I don't think, if I remember correctly, you never thought you were going to have this path, right?
I did not. I did not. I studied music at university, and before then, I was always known in school as the singing girl. I always thought I'd be a singer, mainly because I didn't know what else you could do with music skills. All I saw was, oh, musicians become performers. I didn't really know how else those skills could be applied. Today, I can give you loads of examples, but at the time, that was all I knew. And yeah, throughout school, I would always be the one singing at performances and, at school assemblies and end of year shows and whatever. That was kind of like my identity in many ways. I didn't have any business people in my family, no one that I really knew of. And business was just very alien to me. I never identified myself as a businesswoman, or never thought that perhaps that is something I would become. Entrepreneurship, I didn't even know what that word meant. Actually, I have a funny anecdote. I was once walking around the streets of Helsinki in Finland. My husband is from there. That's why I happen to be in Finland. And you know how sometimes like you have interviewers on the street that take sort of random passerbys, and so somebody stopped me and was like, hey, do you have a second to answer a question? I was like, oh, sure. And they're like, what does entrepreneurship mean to you? And I remember being blank because I did not know what that word meant.
No way.
I did not know what the word meant. And luckily I was with a friend, and the friend answered first, and she was like, oh, it's business people. That's what she said. So I'm like, okay, so it probably has something to do with business. And so I was like, entrepreneurship means very smart people. And I remember I then went home, then Googled the word, and was like, oh, I see. Anyhow, so you can see I was
part of the puzzle, right? Part of the smart people.
Yeah, I was very far off. And the way I kind of ventured into this was during my music studies, I did a course called Music and Business. I only chose it because I had to have one extra module and nothing else was interesting. And I was just like, okay, let's just do this. It was honestly random. There was no thought process behind it. Anyway, and in that module, you basically had to make up a business and learn how to market it and that sort of stuff. And through that, I realized, oh, but I'm kind of doing a business because as a part-time job, which most people in my course were doing part-time jobs, I was babysitting kids because I wasn't interested in retail. I wasn't interested in hospitality work. So I was just babysitting some like neighbors and their kids. But I would always like sing with them and teach them music, had a ukulele. You know, we made up all these songs. And so when I joined this module, I was like, oh, maybe that could be an interesting business, like mixing music with babysitting, musical babysitting. Oh, that sounds fun. So that was kind of like the inception. But again, zero business background, zero ambition to build a business at that stage. It was literally just me needing a bit of pocket money alongside my studies. So that was kind of like the beginnings. And then as the module kind of developed, I started, creating a budget for it, a cash flow projection, starting to kind of think of what this could kind of look like. But again, it felt very theoretical to me. I wasn't like, oh, I'm going to take over the world with this. But then I moved on to do a master's degree, which is where I met Karina, my co-founder. And turns out, and she's got a drama background, and turns out she was doing something similar. But throughout the whole year of doing our masters, we were just very good friends, and we would sometimes meet up for dinner. We both came from babysitting kids, and we'd meet and be like, oh, what did the kid do today? Anyway, once we graduated, I sort of woke up one night and was like, why am I not in business with her? Why are we not doing something together? So we had a chat, and essentially the rest of is history. And we were like, this is big, we can make this, we can have an impact, we can actually build this into much more than a side hustle. And maybe we can take over the world. And so yeah, I suppose the journey to it was not traditional in the sense that it wasn't sort of a big plan or anything. It kind of happened. And yeah, this is where we are today.
I'm fascinated, but I keep coming back to this, but your role always has children involved so far.
Yeah.
What? Is that by choice, or is that by always you wanting to work with children?
I don't know. I mean, from my mom tells me that from the time I was 3, I was always fascinated with marriage and being a mom. So on Saturdays I would like tell my mom we have to go to the church, and we'd like wait outside for like the bride to come out, and she said we have to do this like every weekend, and she was so bored of it. So I mean, I suppose there's nothing very strange about a little girl dreaming of a wedding. That's quite common, but I think it was a bit more than that. It was always like, there was always kind of in my vision, there was children involved, working with them, understanding them. My mom also worked a lot with children, so perhaps there was a little bit of influence from there. So she taught dance classes for children, and she also created this program where she would take children from a nursery to a care home, and she was a storyteller, so she would tell stories to the elderly at the care home, and they got to like hold the children and stuff. So she did little programs like that. So I think definitely there was an influence from there, but there was always children in kind of like my visions of the future. I was always going to be a mom. That was always my, I don't know, there was something in there. Like, while most things were a bit of a blur and a jumble, I didn't know what I wanted to become, really. I didn't have any plans, but I always wanted children. So yeah, I think it's always kind of been there. I don't know how else to explain it. I've just always been fascinated by children. I find them hilarious. I find them they're just such a positive force. And I think it's so easy to get into this habit of like gloomy conversations, or of like, oh, and the weather's so bad now, and oh, I've got to go to work again, and all of this kind of like negative way of approaching the day to day. Children have such an incredible and fascinating way of just seeing the beauty in everything, whether it's that stick that they found or the way this person said something that they find hilarious. And I just love that. And if we could have more of that, you know, as adults, I think we'd be just much happier people. But anyway, there is a fascination around how children are.
And saying what you're saying, what I find fascinating even more is that you're redefining the way to be with children, you know, and work family life. Not work life, but work family life balance. And the way you're speaking of it, because I know there are mothers who are like, oh, I got to do this. They make the responsibility feel like heavy. Yeah. So it's like asking about that weather conversation, you know, but you're just like, no, this is kind of fun.
Yeah. I mean, you know, parenting is hard, and sometimes we're at our wits' end, and sometimes we scream when we wish we just hadn't, and you know, we get impatient. You know, these things do happen, obviously, but I've found that when they do happen, it makes it so much worse for me because it doesn't help. Like, if I shout at my kids, they're just going to have an even bigger meltdown, and then I'm also in a terrible mood. So it's not that it doesn't happen, it does, but I really try to kind of see everything a bit sort of lighthearted and with a funny twist, because it makes me happier as well. I suppose that's also a form of self-care, you know.
I was just going to say, is that one of your best tips? Because I like that tip.
Maybe it is not consciously, but maybe it is. Like, you know, I try to, we do have rules in our household. We do have routines and all of that. But equally, if things don't go to how they're supposed to go, I try to not make a big deal out of it, because the only person it impacts is me, really. If most of the time my kids go to bed at a certain time, and then one weekend it's completely off the rails because, I don't know, family come to visit, who will it actually impact if I get super stressed about that? Me. They're going to have a great time because everyone else is there having a party, whatever. And when you kind of look at it, it is like that for most things. So I just try to be a little bit lighthearted with anything to do with parenting. And, you know, I started the podcast saying an ideal day is when I'm not rushing out the door.
Yeah.
To be clear, most of the time I'm rushing out the door.
I was going to say.
But I'm trying to find the funny side of it. So this morning, I set my alarm clock earlier because this week has been a bit of a disaster. So I'm like, okay, I'm going to wake up earlier. The kids are going to wake up earlier. We're going to be super zen. We weren't. It was still chaos. We just found a funny way to look at it. Like when we got out of the house, we were pretending there was puddles everywhere. So me and my eldest were like jumping over them, which means we were going faster and running. And it just made it more lighthearted. He had a blast. You can't be angry when you're jumping over imaginary. Give it a try. You just can't. So I think it's just about every moment that you can try and turn it in a way almost that a child would. You know, it's served me well. Maybe it's not everybody's solution, but for me, it's kind of helped me to be like actually just kind of thinking every time I'm really upset about something or I'm really frustrated, I'm like, actually, who is this impacting more? Am I just angry and impacting myself? Or is it like really detrimental to my kid? In which case, obviously, want to make a change. Okay. But a lot of the time, it's just on myself. Like I'm stressing over something that actually isn't impacting anybody else. And I'm then in a worse off position because I've got all of these negative emotions.
You know, you remind me of these conversations that kept popping up this week where somebody kept saying, well, it was more with the male gender. They said, well, male genders, our tool is to cope with life is using anger. And you're saying, yeah, I may have the tool of anger, but you completely change it with a sense of humor, a lightheartedness. And you redefine the well-being very well, because I get very frustrated when somebody goes, oh, you need to just relax and breathe and be mindful. And I'm like, say that word one more time. and I teach that. And I'm like, say that word mindfulness one more time. And in my head, I feel like Tom and Jerry going off in my head. But then I have sense of humor in my head and I'm cracking up with myself. So it's refreshing to hear you share, well, that's my well-being.
I have to say, just to add to it, I think my husband helps a lot in that regard.
Really?
He's very humorous and he just wants to laugh it off. And if Rio, my eldest, has a like complete meltdown, he'll just go like, ha ha ha, come on, look at this. This is what happened and this is why we're reacting like this. And then he'll do like the same. And then Rio will just turn around and be like, ha ha ha, you look funny. And initially I was like, well, don't laugh at him. And then I realized, though, he's not laughing at him. He's making, again, the situation more lighthearted. And I don't use the same strategies as him. But I think actually this really stems from him doing that and me seeing how it really works. Like the kids are just like, oh, yeah, this was funny. Okay. And I'm like, yeah, that really, really works. So I think, yeah, definitely he's inspired me to have that outlook in many regards.
So you're known as a parent in tech founder.
Yeah.
Okay. You're doing all this tasking. You bring that lightheartedness in. So let's talk about the tech part. How does that make your life easier? Does it?
Now it does. For a long time, we were completely manual, which meant so the concrete example in Cocorio is that our role is essentially, we have a family, they have kids who require somebody to look after them and they would like some music, some art, whatever. We go through a whole database of almost 1,000 creatives and we try to create that match.
1,000.
So that is a very manual process. And this is how it was for a very long time.
Manually. Manually.
Like, okay, this person works with this, blah, blah, blah. And that's because it's a very specific model because it's not like we didn't do it in the sense that these are our nannies and this is when they're available. We did it the other way around, because we wanted to touch on the flexibility aspect that families need. So the sort of traditional childcare has not really changed much or evolved for years and years and years, which means the kids can go to nursery from 9 to 5 or 9 to 6. You have to commit for this amount of time, or you need to employ a full-time nanny because they need a full-time salary. Anyway, so we were like, but today the job market is different. Parents need flexibility. They need different hours on different days, perhaps. Yeah. So we did it the other way around. We had families coming to us, telling us what slots they needed, and then we were making that match. So we couldn't find a platform that could accommodate that, which is why it was manual for a very long time. But we obviously reached admin capacity fairly quickly. So we had to find a tech solution to support us in creating the match and having less of a person in between. So for a long time, we automated as much as we could using various softwares, but there was still a human element, which meant it was slower, it was admin heavy, and there was room for errors.
Yeah.
So now we've got a tech solution that essentially does it for us, which also means that parents can book in the middle of the night because they're not dependent on an agent being awake. Right. So it's very much facilitated our process and enabled us to scale.
And that's what's freed up time for you as well. So
yes, this is relatively new actually, because we've tried to roll out multiple solutions in the past few years, and we haven't quite hit the nail on the head until very recently. Now we've got a wonderful platform that does everything we need it to. So yeah, it's very nice and allows us to breathe a little bit. Although there's always some iterations. It's still not where we want it to be. There's some things we still want to,
of course,
say. We want the experience for the families to be the gold standard, and we're probably not at that stage yet. So there's still lots that we need to do, but yes, the admin load has reduced,
and that's freed you up to do something else, which is I would love to touch upon as well. Yes. Is you stepped into your teaching career as part of your portfolio, let's put it that way.
That's it. So I do some teaching. I do lecture in some in-curricular work, which means sort of students are doing for example, a BA in innovation, and then I do some guest lectures and some of these. By the way, not only courses that are sort of entrepreneurship or business related. I recently did one for tourism and hospitality, so really wide range. But a lot of my work is really to support students with building their businesses, and this is sort of extracurricular, so not as part of their courses. So you might have students who have an idea or the beginnings of an idea, or actually have already started a business, and I support them both on one-on-one advisory, but I also put on some events for them. We run competitions. We bring in guest speakers to inspire them and talk about their journeys. So there's a whole range of things that we do.
I'm going to be tongue-in-cheek now.
Yeah.
So if you met the guy at Helsinki again and asked you, what does entrepreneurship mean? What would it be for you today?
That's really interesting. Well, I mean, the definition would be somebody who starts their own venture. But I'd like to go further than that, because entrepreneurship and being entrepreneurial is so much more than just having a business. It's a frame of mind. It's skills that are completely transferable. So you can be very entrepreneurial without having a business. It's in the way you think. It's in the way you problem solve. It's in the way you run your life, essentially. It's seeing problems and finding solutions for them before they occur. It's so many things. But for me, it's an invaluable skill set, really.
You know why I asked that question? It's because I see how you've been entrepreneurial in your family life, your business, your teaching career. Because when you were just talking about it's not just teaching, it's about exploration. I've done also tourism. You just jump and you put on. And while you think you're putting on a different hat, it's the hat of finding the solution.
It's
And I
so
love how you just framed it into a nutshell. It's like, does she realize that that's what she's like, I'm entrepreneurial, but it's completely redefined. And I love that.
Oh, thank you. But I think you're right. For many, it's a daunting word, which once I learned the definition of it, it was a very daunting word. And I was like, never would I identify as such. And even when I had started babysitting and was incorporating my music within that, never would I called myself an entrepreneur then, ever. And I think it's important to what's the best term? Perhaps democratize the term entrepreneurship, and for people to see it as not necessarily something to aspire to, but something that can be part of your day to day. I think it is attainable for everyone. It's definitely a learned behavior. Of course, some people might be more naturally inclined to be entrepreneurial, but I definitely believe that it can be learned as well.
Yeah.
So I think definitely, anybody who's got an inkling to problem solve and to sort of step a little bit outside of the box, not just, do what the rules say. And I'm not saying go get in trouble. I'm just saying there is more that you can do. If things have been done the same way for years and years and years and years in your organization, perhaps if you've identified a way to make it a little bit more streamlined, perhaps, daring to suggest it, daring to implement a new solution, those are ways you can be entrepreneurial within your organization. And those are all entrepreneurial skills. And I think it's important for people to know that it is within reach. That can be you.
Okay, so let's take it one step further.
Yeah.
I hope you're going to entertain me on this. For me, I think entrepreneurial is an opportunity to stretch your the joyful, creative ability every human being has.
Yeah.
But yet, we are so afraid in that moment to speak when we have a creative solution that's outside the norm.
Yeah.
You've had the courage to do it and jump into it. What was the suggestion you would give for somebody who's there but freezes? And what will it take for them to just go to that part? What would you share with them?
Oh, it's an interesting one, and you've touched on creativity there, where I could speak on that for years. Sometimes you just need that reassurance that your idea is not silly. And so it might be, if you've got the idea, it is, but perhaps in that meeting, you're feeling like you're getting a lot of imposter syndrome, and you're like, no, I can't say this because it's never been done. Perhaps the best way in this situation is to take a colleague and maybe speak to your colleague first about it, see what they say, and then take it on to sort of the rest of the team. Take it step by step, perhaps, if it does feel like a bit of a stretch to go straight on. I think it's also in the way you phrase things, right? Nobody likes to be told that they're doing something wrong or something badly, right? So if you've got a better solution, it's also about how you phrase it. Be like, well, I have thought of an option. Hear me out. I'd love to hear your thoughts. And this way you're immediately you're bringing in other people. It's not just you against them. It's like, actually, we're all in this together. I want to hear your thoughts. How can we improve this idea that I have? And you're involving everybody. And I think that's a way to kind of make it feel a little less like you're stepping outside of the box on your own. It's kind of like you're testing the waters and you're involving everyone. Everyone can be part of this solution. And I think that can be a way to approach it in a way that feels a bit less stretched, perhaps.
It makes sense. And then also I feel that you'll get clearer with your message along the way, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And if it's the first time that you're kind of attempting something like that, you want people on your side. You don't want to be just alone fighting the, say, old-fashioned systems, It's just going to be a complete war. You want people on your side, so you want to involve them. And by the way, no successful entrepreneur has ever done everything on their own. Okay, there's a big team behind it, whether it's employees or friends or family support, all of that is so, so, so important. And nothing in my journey have I done alone, right? I've always had an incredibly supportive husband who's also an entrepreneur, by the way. So he's been really instrumental. But finding my co-founder, like where we are today, wouldn't have happened when just me alone with my few babysitting clients. Like I wouldn't, I needed that push from my co-founder, but also just having another person to kind of challenge you and to be like, but what if we took it that step further? What if we did that? And we need that. Like no one, sure, some people are great on their own, but there's still an element of a team of support behind always. And for me, it's today it's the whole team that works within Cocorio, but it is my family's been supportive, my co-founder's been instrumental. It's been lecturers from university supporting, bringing us in to inspire people who were in the same course as us. It's seeing the impact in when I'm mentoring people, when I bring in lessons from my own entrepreneurial journey, and they take that on board to not make the same mistakes. That's also support. We always think the mentee is getting everything out of it. No way. When you're able to support mentees with your experiences and it actually supports them, the amount of gratification that it gives you is such a huge support for your own ventures. So there's always a team. Find people in your corner. If you're not building a business, but you're just trying to be entrepreneurial within your work, get colleagues to be on your side. Involve everyone. Don't make your life harder by just trying to do it all on your own. We're stronger together.
Then I totally agree with it. But then I always think about those people that you end up talking about your ideas about. And then they'll say, yeah, I like how you said, what if in the positive, like in the space of growth. But there are also the what if people's like, what if it doesn't work out? What if it's this? And that person who wants to take that leap has now that imposter inside of them, doubting themselves. Have you ever had a moment like that where you just thought, okay, now I'm going to pivot this?
Oh, yeah. Along the journey, there's been so many ups and downs. The first being COVID. We launched. So by the time me and my co-founder decided to go all in the business and to actually scale it, we made all our plans. We had just recruited our first 25 creative nannies. We went from just me and her to 25 creative nannies so that we could focus on the operational side.
Yeah.
We had just secured our first round of investment. We had big plans on how to scale in that first year, and bang, 2 weeks later, first lockdown. So everything went down the drain, and many businesses were in the same boat as us. And so in that same week, we were like, what can we do with what we've got? So we switched to an online offering where our 25 creative nannies offered sort of creative sessions online, but also homework support and general sort of being there for kids. Because at that point, I don't know if you remember, but parents had to homeschool while working, while parenting.
And clean the house.
All at the same time. So we were kind of just like, anything you need us to do, we're on the screen for you. We were just like, whatever it is, we're here. So it was a complete different offering to what we had set out to do. But we were like, how can we still grow our brand, use our first sort of creative nannies that we've got on board? Yeah. And that's how we started it. And we continued, and we actually grew our customer base and our creative nanny base throughout COVID until we were finally able to revert back to where our plans actually lay. But it was actually a really interesting time because we were able to really sort of think about what it was that we wanted to do. And we were able to test our idea. We were able to do some more market research. It essentially bought us time. Because in our plans, we were just going all in straight away. And so in some instances it was a blessing in disguise, even though it definitely our growth was much slower than we had anticipated because of that. It also meant that we did things with perhaps a lot more thought behind them than we would have otherwise. So pivoting, I think, just to get back to your question, pivoting can be really healthy if it's done from an informed position, right? Pivoting for the sake of pivoting is just a hassle for yourself. But if
you're pivoting with your brand in mind.
Yeah,
that's what makes the difference with your values of the brand.
It's true. That's very true. That's very true. I think pivoting in whatever context, whether it's your business, whether it's your career aspirations, relationships, it's all about letting yourself think outside of the plan. And sometimes that can be a little bit difficult. You've got your plan. Perhaps you're in a relationship, you've been together for 5 years. It's kind of, you're probably going to get married and live your life together for the rest of, your life. But something's not quite right, perhaps. But you're not letting yourself think about it because you're in that relationship and it's kind of set out. You know what's next. And
Leah, if you ever plan to write a book, I think that's the title of your book. Think outside the plan.
Think outside. I quite like it, actually.
I think that's the one. That's the book. If you know.
And I think it's not in this particular example. It doesn't mean that you have to break up and go like, never mind, we're not doing this. But actually, it allows you to reflect on what you're doing. It allows you to seek other opportunities, perhaps alongside this plan.
Yeah.
But sometimes when we have such a set plan, we kind of become blind to everything else that's around. And I think it's important. I hope it doesn't come across as you should be looking for other partners while you're in a relationship. That's not what I'm trying to say at all. But what I'm trying to say is sometimes we can be a little bit imprisoned in our plan. Yeah, for lack of a,
So one of the things that you bring to mind while speaking to you is that it's a marriage, right? From what I gather with when you're in a partnership with somebody.
Yeah.
But that also means don't run when the going gets tough.
Yeah. True.
That's what you're kind of telling me because that's think outside the plan, because it's not like running away. It's like, okay, there's a conversation that needs to be had.
Yeah.
Don't run from it. Don't shut it down right away.
For sure. For sure. I think it's all about talking and being open to what's coming next. When we're so set in stone, we also open ourselves up for disappointment if things don't go exactly to our plans. So if you're open to what the future holds, then you leave more opportunities to be pleasantly surprised. And it goes back down to that, right? You want to be happy, you want to be positive, and these things also come when you don't have very rigid expectations of what's happening.
Ooh, I like that.
How can you be surprised if everything has to go to a specific, itinerary? So I think it's just about being open. I'm not saying don't plan. I'm just saying be open with your plans.
Well, like you said, think outside the plan. It doesn't mean you're chucking the plan away.
That's it. That's it. Exactly.
That's what I'm thinking. But I have to share. I want to ask you something completely off base because to me, you're a problem. You're, for me, if I had to define entrepreneurship through Leah's eyes, I'm like, she just solves problems no matter what you throw at her. She's like, all right, you got an issue? Let's make it into an opportunity. I can actually see you walking into it with that mindset, which is...
Yeah, I think that's probably
accurate. But I do want to mention something that is super close to your heart. And I wanted to make sure it is on this podcast. Even, I don't care how many years from now, even if they listen back to it, you are doing something that you're going to be running. But you're not just running, you're not running towards anything or away from something, but you're running for something.
Yes.
Can you share more?
Yes, absolutely. So to give a bit of context, I have been a huge fan of the London Marathon for years and years and years. And I've tried to get into the London Marathon for years and years and years and years. The reason why I love it so much is that it's a day where people come together, people cheer on people that they don't know. The streets are lined with strangers cheering each other on. And that is so, so, so beautiful to me. And then there's the runners, many of them who are running for causes that are really close to their hearts. And seeing that, it's 42 kilometers of running. Many people who participate aren't runners. It's a huge, huge, huge challenge for them to go through. And so many are doing it for a loved one that they might have lost, for research on perhaps a disease that somebody they know is affected by. Whatever the cause is, it's just a really, really beautiful day. And every year I go out and support. I always shed my little tear, sometimes two, every year. And I finally got a place to run for the London Marathon 2025. And while I love the event and all of that, the big reason as to why I wanted to run it was because I lost my dad when I was 14 to a blood cancer. And at the time, I lived in Tanzania. Wonderful, wonderful place. But there was no dedicated support for patients with the diagnosis, nor their families. And we were very lost, really, for lack of a better word. We would just didn't know what to do, what to say. No one else around us did. Mm-hmm. It was a very alienating time. And it was quite short-lived. My dad lost his battle pretty fast. And obviously, that has an imprint on anyone, right? And when I found out that here in the UK, there's so many charities that support people with these kinds of diagnoses, but also their families, I thought it was amazing and something I really wish we had at the time. And actually, a close friend of ours, he's recently been diagnosed with an incurable cancer, and they've got a charity that really, really supports them. And not just our friend who's diagnosed, but his mother, his wife, and all of their relatives. And it's just incredible to see how dependent also they've become on this charity. And so I just really wanted to do something where I could perhaps support in some way for other families not to have to go through the same experience that my family had to go through. Yeah. And so, long story short, I'm running the marathon and raising funds for leukemia care. And they support leukemia patients, but also other form of blood cancers. And they're doing really great work. And I'm really proud to be fundraising for them. And I cannot wait to run the marathon. I am probably going to cry like the whole way through. So it's not going to be a pretty sight, but it's going to be. Well,
it's going to be a heartful moment.
Yes, I cannot wait. And I'm really grateful so many have supported the cause already. I'm still fundraising, so if anybody's interested,
can you give me the link? I would love to share it.
Well, the marathon itself is on the 27th of April, so there's quite a bit of time still to fundraise. My husband's also running with me, by the way, which is really nice. That's going to be a really, I think, a really needed support on the day. So I'm really grateful that we both managed to get a spot.
On a last note.
Yes.
Are you ready for the question? Let's go for it, right?
Let's just do it.
Is there something that you now know that you didn't expect to know that makes all the difference?
Yeah, I think so. And I think I've alluded to it already in this or in our discussion, but I think it's really choice. I feel like for a long time, I perhaps didn't realize just how much choice I have. And I appreciate I'm in a privileged situation. A lot of people don't have all the choices I have, but I think we have a lot more choice than we think we do. And I would really urge people to kind of really think about their situation, anything that perhaps isn't going super well or maybe they know can be better, and just see, I do think we have a lot more choice in changing things for the better. And we really do have that power in many instances. And I think that's something that I need to remind myself a lot. So hopefully this serves as a reminder to some of you listening.
I hope so. I'm going to leave it on that note because I really think that's a powerful message for everyone to take away, is that, like you said, I don't think you need to use privilege as like, because of that, it's made my choices easier. It's about knowing that you can also create your choice. That's what I've taken away from our conversation today.
Yeah, I think so. I think you're right.
Oh, Leah, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. I really enjoyed our conversation.
As did I. Thank you so much for having me. And I hope that, maybe it's given somebody an inkling of inspiration.
It's given me
whatever it is.
It's given me a lot, so I can only imagine it's given others. So
I'm very pleased. Thank you so much. I've enjoyed it tremendously.
So there you have it. Did you expect that every person can be an entrepreneur? Every one of us have entrepreneurial skills inside of us. I love the way Leah explained it. But I also want to invite you to this. Do you have an idea that runs inside of your head and you're probably dismissing it or you're putting it to one side? Can Leah's way of entrepreneurial thinking approach support you in not dismissing that idea and actually playing with it, stretching it, being creative with it, and take it to another level? I hope she inspired you as much as I did. Do leave a comment in the reviews. Let me know what your thoughts are of this week's episode. And as always, I love to hear what you thought about it. Be sure to DM me. And I do have a newsletter coming out. I am traveling currently to the Middle East, and I'm excited to understand how a culture can teach me something about myself that I probably didn't even know of. If you want to follow more, be sure you subscribe to the newsletter as well. That's it. All right, till the next one. Have a good week. And yes, I am going to be more consistent.